Hello friends, this is second part of TCS Scrum Master scenario based interview questions. And if you are coming first time on this channel, you can check the part 1 as well. Link is in the description box. All these questions will check your practical experience as a Scrum Master, so watch complete video with full explanation. For more similar upcoming videos, please subscribe and hit bell icon so you will not miss any new videos. Friends, at the end of the video, if you like my efforts, please hit like button. Your one like is big motivation for me. So friends, let's start with Scrum Master interview questions and answer. Friends, the best way to benefit from this video is to turn on the subtitles. Pause the video after every question and try to frame your own answers. Then compare with given answers. Look forward these answers as pointers only and always try to add your real world example. Infuse your experience in answer to make them unique. Interview consists of 3 rounds. First round and the second round will be the technical, and the third round consists of 2 parts, behavioral and HR round. It will take approximately 2 to 6 weeks to complete interview process. Some Scrum Masters are concerned with ADAPS, a team's velocity during a sprint, as if a higher velocity is better. But points are a relative measure of the work that a team needs to do for a feature X. They are not high or low, they are just more or less than some other features the team choose as a point of reference. If points are efforts, we don't make a greater effort with time. You make the same effort, but it's more productive. So a story that was estimated at 5 points when the team first formed could eventually be estimated as 3 or 2 points as the team increased its skills. Is that correct? Velocity is a measure of team's historical capacity rather than a directly correlated measure of the team's speed or productivity. It should be used primarily during sprint planning to forecast sprint backlog capacity for the upcoming sprint. A team's capacity can certainly change over time. Capacity can go down during holiday periods or during reorganizations, or go up as a team gains knowledge, leverage iterative improvements to their test-driven design, or pay down technical debt. However, it's a fallacy to assume that capacity should have an upward trend. Even though the cone of uncertainty narrows later in a project, the cost of technical debt and refactoring generally increase, and these factors consume team capacity as well. In addition, it is not uncommon for the complexity for user stories to increase over time as the low-hanging fruit is picked up during the product backlog items. Again, this added complexity will consume an equal amount of capacity from the team. The goal of Scrum and iterative agile development in general is to have a sustainable and a predictable development cadence. As such, it is generally better to aim for consistent velocity over time rather than for increasing velocity. Story points measure a combination of complexity and efforts, which is what makes them hard for people to understand. Risk, uncertainty are likely also components that are part of the estimate. In the end, velocity is a measure of what we have delivered in the past sprints. It's an indicator of what we can expect to deliver next sprint when nothing changed much. We do see that Scrum teams improve over time, however they get better at what they do. They automate things that take up a lot of time each sprint. They increase their knowledge of the domain and they start to be able to reuse code elements from previous sprint to build on top of it. As such, it's normal to see teams increase their velocity over time. Often that velocity reaches a ceiling, their maximum capability given the current circumstances, and won't be able to start climbing again without a major event. That event could be a training, changes to the way of working, a new team member with a key skill set, or a switch from one technology to another. Story points are a relative measure of efforts. Over time, a team may get better at doing things, but that does not necessarily mean a 5 story points become a 3 story points. Here's an example. Let's say story X involves writing a search feature on a web page and is estimated by the team as 5 points. Story Y is a setting to hide picture on a web page and it is estimated by the team as 3 points because relative to story X it is smaller. Now say the team improves massively in the next year so that they can do both story X and Y in half the time they originally took. But note that the relative size of the two stories has not changed. For this reason, the team might still estimate them as 5 points and 3 points respectively. However, if the team improved their ability to story X but did not improve their ability to do story Y, then the relative size would change. They could perhaps both become 3 point stories. A team can decide to reset their baseline for what a story point is. The downside with this is that they will lose some value of their velocity history, as it will no longer be a good guide what their capacity is for the future sprint. But there is nothing to stop a team doing this. Are daily stand-ups the same for Kanban and Scrum teams? In Scrum, a time-boxed daily stand-up with a structured format is mandated by a framework. Kanban is less prescriptive and does not actually mandate the daily stand-up as a formal ceremony. However, Kanban teams often borrow the practice from Scrum for the same reason that Scrum teams implement Kanban style board, because it's an effective agile practice that promotes a continuous inspect and adapt feedback loop. Status pull versus stand-ups. So there is a big difference between a status pull and a daily stand-up. A status pull is when a member of team take turns reporting into a central authority that can be a line manager or a project manager, while a daily stand-up is a commitment and a coordination meeting between the members of a team. So Agile framework actively encourage other forms of status tracking and communication about the state of the project. And visible artifacts like the sprint backlog or a Kanban storyboard greatly reduce the need for a formal status pull. When there is an information that can be derived directly from the framework artifact, Agile practitioners generally try to gather the necessary information through dialogues and conversations with the team members rather than through a formal reporting in a group setting. So status pull as a form of a formal reporting are strongly discouraged in Agile methodology. Kanban uses stand-ups, but the format is different than a Scrum. So Blocker First is a good tool for getting teams into problem solving, taking action mindset, and focusing on continuous flow during the stand-up. I've observed a number of mature Kanban teams that choose this as their primary stand-up format because they only need to focus on blocked items and trust the Kanban board silently communicate all other work items. This requires a high degree of trust, transparency, and discipline. So Kanban stand-up focus on the board, and effective framework for us has been discussing 4 buckets for 5 to 15 minutes in total. The very first one is the blocker, the other one is the emergencies. So anything we need to address over other normal high prioritized work, we can discuss in emergency block. The third one is a non-mover. So there are a lot of things that are not moving, they are stagnant. So we can ask like, why are these things are not moving in this under non-mover? And then we have category called others. So in that we can pick anything like category of items and we can walk down it. You are a scrum master for 2 different teams. The product owner of one of the teams left recently. So you have a new product owner. The team is fairly experienced with the product. Since the product owner is new to the product, she is relying far too much on the team to come up with the user stories and also slicing the stories from Epic. In the last two to three sprints, she has consumed a lot of time from the team by scheduling meetings with them, which is resulting in loss of valuable time for the developers in completing their user stories. How should we handle the situation as a Scrum Master? For the immediate future, Scrum Master need to spend more time working with the product owner and less time focusing on the development team. Scrum Master and the product owner both need to spend a couple of sprints refining their roles and learning to work together. And both need to gain a better understanding of respective roles in Scrum process. As a Scrum Master, you have a number of responsibilities, and one of them is educating product owners on the role they play in the process. Another is actively working with the product owner to perform backlog refinement to ensure the product backlog is in good shape for the sprint planning. If your product owner is new to the Scrum process or not engaging properly within the framework, this is an educational task that Scrum Master are responsible for. Take the time to talk with her about backlogs, sprints, estimation, and the various meetings and artifacts that go along with Scrum. In particular, Scrum Master wants to take some time to explain about time boxing and about the appropriate meetings for discussing user stories, decomposing epics, estimating stories, and the other things that she wants to do. The things she wants seem reasonable. It may just be the fact that she wants to do them outside the framework that causing difficulties for the team. She may also need some advice or guidance on how to develop user stories or on how to prioritize them in product backlog. Scrum Master should be providing that advice and spending some additional time during backlog refinement in particular to make sure that her questions are being addressed properly within the framework. The product owner and the Scrum Master must be an active collaborator. Keep in mind that onboarding new team members will have an impact on your velocity, and that's fine, it's all part of the process. Adjust your velocity expectations accordingly and make sure you communicate about the adjustment clearly to the product owner. It is probably more important for the product owner to get up to the speed with the team and with the Scrum than it is to maintain an artificial velocity level for its own sake. Part of your role is to communicate effectively about velocity, including what is measures, what may impact it, and how changes to the team's velocity may impact project schedules. As a Scrum Master, your role is not to control the velocity, but rather to report on it and help organization to use the metric effectively in its planning. A new team member, especially a new product owner, will have a big impact on project velocity. So Scrum Master's job to make this impact transparent and visible and to help set everyone's expectation accordingly. Backlog refinement is a defined meeting for the entire team to discuss the product backlog, identifying which stories are epic, which stories will probably need decompositions or refinement before being accepted into a sprint, or discussing the priority of a backlog items are all constructive topics for backlog refinement. Decomposition happen either here or in sprint planning. It's better to do it in a backlog refinement when possible. A decomposition often happens in sprint planning too, simply by virtue of the fact that sprint planning is more about near-term, fine-graining planning. It's a Scrum Master job to facilitate these framework-defined meetings, especially with a new product owner on the team. We may need to shift more of a Scrum Master attention away from the development side and onto the backlog management side in order to get the entire team back on track. Define what are story points and when does a development team assign. In short, story points are measurement units that help estimate the amount of efforts needed to develop a feature. In short, story points are measurement units that help estimate the amount of efforts needed to develop a feature. Each story point is assigned a relative value, and these values together give the size of that user story. The different times that Scrum team estimates stories. The very first is a backlog refinement. In backlog refinement, the team looks 1 or 2 sprints out to see what is coming up and prepare these stories to be brought into the sprint. Estimation is a common thing to happen here because the act of trying to estimate the stories often bring out detail about the story. Second is a release planning. This is a planning that takes a high level look at the next few months and work with many teams that take a first guess estimate at all stories in the release planning. It is understood in these teams that these estimates are rough guesses used for general planning purposes, and they usually revisit the estimate in backlog refinement closer to actually working the item. Third is a sprint planning. It is not common practice anymore to estimate right at sprint planning, but it still happens sometimes. Usually this happens with the stories that how you will make the retrospective sessions engaging and useful with multiple Scrum teams involved. Let's say you have 50 team members across several Scrum teams. We can define the topics to be discussed upfront based on the data collected and affinity diagram. That would make it easier for participants to prepare. But we can also have that participants suggest topics at the beginning of the meeting and do a dot voting and prioritization, or use open space technology to have people organize themselves on topics that they consider important, or turn it into a storytelling events where people share stories on what they experience and learn. There are several possible formats that we can use for larger retrospectives. Open space, where attendees bring up topics and build their own agenda. Groups will mostly be small, and as people are free to choose, their engagement will be high. Having people first reflect alone, then with one other person, then in group of 4, and then everyone involved based on 1 to 4, all from liberating structure. This exercise tends to engage people. Using the bubble up exercise from Agile retrospective resource. Relevant topic will bubble up will increase the usefulness. A timeline retrospective where all attendees bring up highlights and lowlights will probably give a lot of data to focus. Look where there are many post-its or where there is a bigger span of low and highlights. As a Scrum Master, make sure that topics are visible for all attendees. Example, use a beamer with live updates, large A4 format sticky notes, big marker, etc. This is crucial to keep people involved. Thank you for watching. I am sure you have learned something new today. For similar videos, please click subscribe and hit bell icon so you will get notification. All the best for your upcoming interviews.